What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved and famously humble actors reaches his breaking point on live television? What happens when a morning show interview spirals so far out of control that a guest who never loses his cool decides he has had enough? This is the story of the moment Keanu Reeves walked off the Good Morning America set after a heated exchange with Michael Strahan that left the entire studio in shocked silence. Before we get into what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think really caused this whole situation to explode the way it did. Now let's get into it. The Good Morning America studio was buzzing with its usual morning energy. Keanu Reeves was scheduled as a guest to promote his latest project, and the producers were excited. Getting Keanu on the show was always considered a win. He was known for being gracious, thoughtful, and incredibly easy to work with. Michael Strahan was set to conduct the interview, and on paper, this seemed like it would be a smooth, enjoyable segment. Nobody could have predicted what was about to unfold. The interview started off normally enough. Keanu walked onto the set with his characteristic low-key demeanor, shaking hands with Michael and settling into the chair across from him. The audience applauded warmly. Michael opened with some light banter, commenting on how great it was to have Keanu back on the show. Keanu smiled and thanked him, seeming relaxed. The first few questions were straightforward. Michael asked about the new project, what drew Keanu to the role, and what the experience of filming had been like. Keanu answered thoughtfully, giving sincere, detailed responses. He talked about the creative process, his co-stars, and the themes of the story. Everything seemed perfectly fine. But then, something shifted. Michael transitioned away from the project and started asking more personal questions. He asked Keanu about his approach to fame and how he managed to stay so grounded. Keanu gave a diplomatic answer, saying he just tried to focus on the work and not get caught up in the noise. He mentioned that he valued his privacy and tried to keep his personal life separate from his professional one. Michael nodded along, but there was something in his expression that suggested he was not entirely satisfied with that answer. Michael leaned forward slightly and said, "You know, a lot of people admire that about you, Keanu, but there are also people who wonder if maybe that whole humble, private thing is part of the image. Like, is it really who you are, or is it something you have cultivated because it works for you?" The question hung in the air. You could see Keanu's expression change slightly. Not angry, but surprised. Michael was essentially asking if Keanu's authenticity was an act. Keanu took a breath and responded calmly. He said, "I think anyone who knows me or has worked with me would tell you that I am just trying to live my life in a way that feels right to me. I am not trying to cultivate anything. I just do not think it is necessary to share every aspect of my life with the public. That does not make it fake. It just makes it mine." It was a measured response, but you could hear a slight edge in his voice. Michael smiled, but it was not entirely warm. He said, Sure, I get that. But come on, you have to admit that the whole Keanu Reeves mystique has been good for your career, right? Like, the internet loves you. You are a meme. You are everyone's favorite celebrity. That has to have some benefits." Keanu shifted in his seat. He said, "I appreciate that people have been kind to me, but I have never asked for any of that. I have been doing this job for a long time, and I just try to do good work. If people respond to that, I am grateful. But I am not sitting around thinking about how to be a meme or how to manage some mystique. I am just living my life." Michael nodded, but he was not letting it go. He said, "Okay, but let's be real. There are a lot of actors out there who work just as hard as you do, who are just as talented, but they do not get the same level of adoration. Don't you think part of that is because you have been really careful about your image? Like, you never really slip up. You never say the wrong thing. It almost feels too perfect sometimes." The atmosphere in the studio was starting to shift. The audience was quiet now. Keanu's jaw tightened slightly, and he took a moment before responding. He said, I do not know what you want me to say, Michael. I am not perfect. I have never claimed to be. I have made plenty of mistakes in my life, both personally and professionally. But I do not think I need to air all of that out publicly just to prove that I am human. Michael leaned back and said, I hear you. I just think it is interesting that you are so guarded, like we are sitting here having a conversation, and it feels like you are holding back. Why not just open up a little? Let people see the real you. Keanu's expression hardened. He said, This is the real me. I am sitting here, talking to you, answering your questions. Just because I am not giving you some dramatic confession or some deeply personal story does not mean I am not being real. Not everything needs to be a performance. Michael raised his hands and said, Hey, I am not saying it needs to be a performance. I am just saying that people are curious about you. They want to know more. And sometimes it feels like you are deliberately keeping them at arm's length. Keanu looked directly at Michael and said, Maybe I am. Maybe I think there's value in keeping some things private. Maybe I think that not everything needs to be consumed and dissected by strangers on the internet. Is that really so hard to understand? The tension was palpable now. Michael said, I think people would argue that when you are a public figure, you give up a certain amount of that privacy. It comes with the territory. Keanu shook his head and said, I did not sign up to be a public figure. I signed up to be an actor. Those are two different things. And just because I am in movies does not mean I owe anyone access to my personal life. I do my job. I show up. I give everything I have to the work. That should be enough. Michael said, But is it though? I mean, you are sitting here promoting a movie right now. You are asking people to go see it, to spend their money on it. Don't you think they deserve to feel like they know who you are? Keanu's voice was steady but firm. He said, They know my work. That is what I am offering. If that is not enough for someone, then they do not have to buy a ticket. I am not going to pretend to be someone I am not just to sell a movie. Michael seemed to realize he was losing control, but instead of pulling back, he pushed harder. He said, Look, Keanu, I am not trying to attack you here. I am just asking questions that I think a lot of people have. You have got this reputation as the nicest guy in Hollywood, and I am just wondering if maybe that is a bit of a burden. Like, do you ever feel like you have to live up to that? Do you ever just want to say screw it and let people see that you are not always nice? Keanu stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, I think this interview is a pretty good example of me not being nice. Michael laughed, but it was forced. He said, Come on, you are still being polite about it. Keanu did not smile. He said, I am being polite because I am on your show, and I am trying to be professional. But I am going to be honest with you, Michael. I do not appreciate what you are doing here. You invited me on to talk about a project, and instead you are sitting here questioning my character and implying that I am some kind of fraud. That is not okay. Michael's expression shifted. He said, I never said you were a fraud. Keanu cut him off. He said, You did not have to say it. You have been dancing around it this whole time. And I have tried to answer your questions respectfully, but you keep pushing. So let me make this clear. I am not performing for you. I am not performing for the audience. I am not performing for anyone. This is who I am. And if that is not interesting enough for you, then maybe you should have booked a different guest. The studio was dead silent. Michael tried to recover, saying, Keanu, I think you are misunderstanding what I am trying to do here. Keanu stood up. He said, No, I understand exactly what you are trying to do. You are trying to create a moment. You are trying to get me to crack, or get defensive, or give you something that will go viral. And I am not going to do it. I came here in good faith to talk about a project that I care about, and you turned it into an interrogation. So I am done. He reached down and removed his microphone, setting it carefully on the chair. Michael stood as well, clearly trying to de-escalate. He said, Keanu, come on. Let's just take a breath, and Keanu held up a hand and said, I am taking a breath somewhere else. And with that, Keanu Reeves walked off the Good Morning America set. The cameras were still rolling. That was the thing that made this moment so extraordinary. This was not a commercial break situation where cooler heads could prevail off camera. This was happening live, in real time, with millions of people watching from home. Michael Strahan stood there, microphone still in hand, looking genuinely stunned. The co-hosts at the news desk were frozen, unsure whether to cut away or let this play out. The audience sat in complete silence. Michael finally found his voice. He said, "Well, that just happened." He tried to laugh it off, but you could hear the shakiness in his tone. He looked toward the camera and said, "We are going to take a quick break. We will be right back." But before they could cut away, something unexpected happened. Keanu stopped walking. He was almost off the set, nearly out of view of the main camera, but he turned around. Everyone in the studio held their breath. Keanu walked back toward Michael, not all the way, but close enough that he did not have to shout. He said, "You know what, Michael? I changed my mind. I am not going to just walk away and let you spin this however you want." Michael looked relieved for a split second, probably thinking Keanu was going to sit back down. But that is not what happened. Keanu stayed standing. He said, "I want to say something, and I want to say it while we are still on the air, because I think people deserve to hear it." Michael nodded slowly and said, "Okay, yeah, absolutely, go ahead." Keanu took a breath and addressed the camera directly. He said, "I have been doing this job for a really long time, and in that time, I have done a lot of interviews. Most of them have been great. But every once in a while, you sit down with someone who is more interested in creating drama than having a dialogue. And that is what just happened here." Michael started to interject, saying, "Keanu, I really think you are misinterpreting." But Keanu held up a hand and kept talking. He said, "You asked me if my humility is an act. You asked me if I am deliberately cultivating some kind of image. You questioned whether I am being real with people, and I answered you honestly. But that was not enough. You kept pushing, and I think the reason you kept pushing is because you wanted me to lose my temper. You wanted me to give you a soundbite. You wanted something you could play over and over again on social media, and I get it. I understand how this business works, but I am not going to play that game." Michael looked uncomfortable now. He said, "That is not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to have an honest conversation." Keanu shook his head. He said, "An honest conversation does not involve repeatedly implying that someone is lying about who they are. An honest conversation does not involve badgering someone after they have already given you an answer. An honest conversation requires respect, and I did not feel respected here today." The audience was still silent, but you could sense that some of them were nodding along. Michael shifted his weight and said, "I hear what you are saying, and I am sorry if you felt disrespected." "That genuinely was not my intention," Keanu said. "Maybe it was not your intention, but it was the result, and I think that is something worth acknowledging." He paused, then continued, "Look, I know I am not perfect. I know I am not the easiest person to interview sometimes. I am quiet. I am private. I do not give a lot away. But that is not because I am hiding something. It is just who I am. And I have worked really hard over the years to be okay with that, to not apologize for it, because for a long time, I did apologize for it. I felt like I had to be more outgoing, more charismatic, more willing to share everything about my life, and it made me miserable, so I stopped." Michael listened, and for the first time in the interview, he seemed to actually hear what Keanu was saying. He said, "I can respect that. I really can. And I am sorry if my questions made you feel like you had to defend who you are." Keanu nodded but did not smile. He said, "I appreciate that, but here is the thing. This is not just about me. This is about the culture we have created around celebrity and fame. We act like famous people owe us something, like they owe us access to their lives, their thoughts, their pain. And if they do not give it to us, we accuse them of being fake or distant, or too good for everyone. But that is not fair. People are allowed to have boundaries. They are allowed to keep parts of themselves private. That does not make them frauds. It makes them human. The camera operators were still filming, capturing every word. Michael said, "You are right. You are absolutely right. And I think that is an important conversation to have." Keanu said, "Then maybe we should have had that conversation instead of the one we just had. Maybe, instead of questioning my authenticity, you could have asked me why I think privacy matters. Maybe instead of implying that I am playing some kind of game, you could have asked me what it is like to navigate fame in a way that feels honest to me. That would have been a real conversation." Michael nodded and said, "You are right. I could have approached this differently. I should have approached this differently." Keanu said, "Yeah, you should have." There was a long pause. Michael said, "So, where do we go from here? Do you want to sit back down? Do you want to start over?" Keanu looked at the chair, then back at Michael. He said, "Honestly, no. I do not think I do. I think I have said what I needed to say, and I do not think sitting back down is going to change anything. This interview is done." Michael looked disappointed but nodded. He said, "I understand, and again, I am sorry." Keanu said, "I believe you, but an apology does not erase what happened. It just acknowledges it. And I think that is important to remember." He turned to leave again, but this time, Michael did not try to stop him. Instead, Michael addressed the camera. He said, "We are going to take a break. When we come back, we will have more of Good Morning America." The feed cut to commercial, but the impact had already been done. What happened next was equally fascinating. The show went to commercial, but because this was live television and the internet moves at lightning speed, people were already reacting. Social media exploded. Clips of the exchange were being uploaded and shared within minutes. People were taking sides. Some were defending Keanu, saying he had every right to call out what he clearly felt was disrespectful questioning. Others were defending Michael, saying he was just doing his job and asking the kinds of questions that viewers wanted answers to. When Good Morning America came back from commercial, Michael was back at the main news desk with his co-hosts. They addressed what had just happened, but their tone was cautious. Michael said, "Obviously, that did not go the way any of us expected. Keanu Reeves is someone I have a lot of respect for, and I am sorry that our conversation took the turn that it did. I think there are some important lessons in what just happened, and I am going to take some time to reflect on that." One of the co-hosts said, "I think what Keanu said about boundaries and privacy is really important. And it is something we should all think about, not just in terms of how we interview guests, but in how we engage with public figures in general." Michael agreed and said, "Absolutely. I think that is the takeaway here." The show moved on to other segments, but the energy in the studio was different. Everyone knew that what had just happened was going to be the story of the day. Meanwhile, Keanu had left the building. He did not storm out dramatically. He did not slam doors or yell at anyone. He simply walked out, got into a car, and left. That was it. No grand exit. No final statement to the press. He had said what he needed to say on camera, and he was done. That was very on brand for him. He made his point, he stood his ground, and then he moved on. The story dominated the news cycle for the rest of the day. Every entertainment outlet was covering it. Every talk show was discussing it. People were dissecting every word of the exchange, analyzing body language, debating who was right and who was wrong. Some people praised Keanu for standing up for himself and for speaking out about the invasive nature of celebrity culture. Others criticized him for being too sensitive. Some people thought Michael had crossed a line. Others thought he was just doing his job. There was no consensus, which made the story even more compelling. What was interesting was how the conversation evolved. It started as a simple debate about what happened on Good Morning America, but it quickly became a much larger discussion about fame, privacy, respect, and the responsibilities of both public figures and the media. People started sharing their own experiences with feeling pressured to share more than they were comfortable with. It became less about Keanu and Michael specifically, and more about the dynamics they represented. Industry professionals weighed in as well. Other actors came forward, some publicly and some anonymously, sharing their own stories about interviews that had made them uncomfortable. They talked about being asked invasive questions, about hosts who seemed more interested in getting a reaction than having a genuine conversation. One actor said in an interview later that day, "What Keanu did took courage. A lot of us have felt that way in interviews, but did not have the guts to say anything. We just smiled and powered through because that is what you are supposed to do. But maybe we should not have to." Journalists and interviewers had their own perspectives. Some admitted that the pressure to create viral moments had changed the way interviews were conducted. One entertainment journalist said, "Look, I get it. We are all competing for attention in a crowded media landscape, but there is a difference between asking tough questions and being disrespectful, and I think that line has gotten blurred." Others defended the approach, arguing that celebrities benefit enormously from their fame and that questions about their public persona are fair game. But what Keanu had said on the air kept resonating. The idea that being in movies does not mean you sign away your right to privacy. The idea that authenticity does not require constant disclosure. The idea that boundaries are not the same as being fake. These concepts struck a chord with a lot of people. It forced people to think about what they expected from celebrities and whether those expectations were reasonable. By evening, both Keanu and Michael had released statements. Keanu's statement was brief. He said that he stood by everything he had said during the interview and that he hoped the conversation would encourage people to think more carefully about how they engage with public figures. He thanked his fans for their support and said he was moving forward with his work. Michael's statement was longer and more reflective. He acknowledged that he could have handled the interview differently and that he had learned from the experience. He said he had reached out to Keanu privately and that they had spoken. He did not elaborate on what was said, but he made it clear that he respected Keanu. The most interesting development came a few days later when other celebrities started referencing the incident in their own interviews. Some used it as a teachable moment, gently redirecting interviewers when questions felt too invasive. Others were more direct, saying things like, "I am going to pull a Keanu here," and say, "I would rather not answer that." It became a kind of shorthand, a way for guests to assert their boundaries without having to launch into a full explanation, and surprisingly, most interviewers respected it. The incident had created a shift in how these conversations were conducted. What also emerged was a deeper appreciation for Keanu himself. People had always liked him, but this moment revealed something more. It showed that his humility and groundedness were not an act, but a reflection of deeply held values. When pushed, he did not crumble or lash out inappropriately. He stood firm, articulated his position clearly, and then walked away with dignity. It was a masterclass in setting boundaries. Even those who initially thought he had overreacted came around when they really considered what had happened. He had been invited on a show to promote a project, and instead he had been put in a position where he had to defend his character. That was not okay, and he was right to say so. For Michael Strahan, the incident was a learning experience. In subsequent interviews, he talked openly about what had happened and what he had taken away from it. He said, "I have interviewed hundreds of people over the years, and I have always tried to be fair and respectful. But this situation showed me that sometimes, even with the best intentions, you can miss the mark. I am grateful to Keanu for being honest with me, even though it was uncomfortable. It made me a better interviewer. His willingness to reflect publicly earned him respect. People appreciated that he did not get defensive or try to shift blame. He owned it, learned from it, and moved forward." Keanu, true to form, did not dwell on the incident. He continued promoting his project, doing interviews with outlets that approached the conversation with respect and genuine curiosity. When asked about what had happened on Good Morning America, he was gracious but firm. He would say something like, I said what I needed to say in that moment, and I think Michael and I both learned something from it. I am not interested in rehashing it endlessly. I am more interested in talking about the work. And that was that. He had made his point, the conversation had shifted, and he was ready to move on. Looking back, the moment Keanu Reeves walked off, the Good Morning America set became more than just a viral clip. It became a cultural moment, a line in the sand that said enough. Enough with the invasive questions. Enough with the expectation that fame means you surrender your humanity. Enough with interviews that prioritize spectacle over substance. It was a reminder that celebrities are people, that they have limits, and that those limits deserve to be respected. And it was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply say no. Keanu Reeves walked off that set with his dignity intact, his values clear, and his message heard. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that authenticity is not about performing for others. It is about knowing who you are, standing by that, and refusing to compromise it for anyone. That is the real story here. Not the conflict, not the drama, but the clarity. The moment when someone said, "This is who I am, and if that is not enough for you, then I am not the problem." And that is a lesson worth remembering. So if you made it this far, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we are going to keep bringing you stories like this that make you think. And drop a comment below. I want to know, do you think Keanu was right to walk off, or should he have handled it differently? Let me know what you think.